What if Rhaegar Targaryen killed Robert Baratheon at the Trident and conquered the Seven Kingdoms? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The Battle of the Trident rages with a fury that shakes the very foundations of the Seven Kingdoms. Steel clashes against steel as 20,000 men fight for the future of Westeros. The waters of the Trident run red with blood, and the air fills with the screams of dying horses and the battle cries of desperate men. On one side stands Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, the Silver Prince with his dragon banner flying high above the carnage. On the other, Robert Baratheon leads the rebel forces that would see the Mad King's dynasty burn. Robert swings his massive warhammer in wide arcs, crushing loyalist skulls with every blow. His antlered helm catches the afternoon sun as he cuts a bloody path through the melee. The rebels follow their lord with fierce determination, believing that victory lies within their grasp. Behind them, Ned Stark fights with ice across his back, his grey eyes scanning the battlefield for any sign of his friend's safety. But the loyalist forces do not break. Prince Lewin Martell of Dorne leads his spearmen in a desperate charge against the rebel left flank. His orange and red banners snap in the wind as Dornish steel finds gaps in northern mail. Sir Barristan Selmy cuts down 3 rebels with swift strokes of his blade, his white cloak already stained crimson from the day's fighting. The tide of battle shifts back and forth like the waters of the river itself. For every rebel that falls, a loyalist joins him in death. The muddy ground grows slick with blood and rain, making every step treacherous for both armies. Horses scream and fall, throwing their riders into the chaos below. Then the moment comes that will decide the fate of kingdoms. Rhaegar Targaryen spurs his black destrier forward, his violet eyes fixed on the rebel lord who has brought such destruction to his realm. Robert sees the prince approaching and grins beneath his helm. This is what he has waited for since the war began, the chance to kill the man who stole his Lyanna. The two lords crash together in the middle of the Trident with a sound like thunder. Robert's warhammer comes down in a crushing blow that would shatter lesser men, but Rhaegar twists in his saddle at the last moment. The hammer catches only air as the prince's blade slides between the plates of Robert's armor. Robert roars in pain and fury, swinging his weapon in a wide arc. Rhaegar ducks low against his horse's neck, feeling the wind from the hammer's passage. His sword comes up in a perfect thrust, finding the gap beneath Robert's gorget. Steel pierces flesh and slides between ribs, seeking the rebel's heart. For a moment, time seems frozen. The battle rages around them, but these two men exist in a bubble of deadly silence. Robert's eyes widen behind his visor as he feels the cold steel sliding deeper into his chest. His warhammer slips from nerveless fingers and splashes into the red water below. "Lyanna," Robert whispers, blood frothing at his lips. Rhaegar's face shows no triumph, only grim necessity. "She was never yours to lose," he says quietly, pulling his blade free. Robert Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End and leader of the Great Rebellion, topples from his horse and strikes the water with a tremendous splash. The rubies on Rhaegar's armor catch the light as he raises his bloodied sword high above his head. "Robert is dead!" he shouts, his voice carrying across the battlefield like a dragon's roar. "The usurper is dead." The effect is immediate and devastating. Rebel soldiers who had been pressing forward suddenly stop, their faces pale with shock and disbelief. Robert Baratheon was supposed to be invincible. He was supposed to crush the Dragon Prince and claim the Iron Throne. He was not supposed to die in the mud like any common soldier. Ned Stark hears the prince's words and feels his heart turn to ice in his chest. He spurs his horse forward through the melee, desperate to reach his fallen friend. But loyalist soldiers surge between them, emboldened by their prince's victory. Rhaegar's dragon banners seem to multiply across the field as men who had wavered now choose their side. "The dragon lives," comes the cry from 1,000 loyalist throats. "Long live Prince Rhaegar!" The rebel army begins to crumble, Men who had followed Robert Baratheon into battle now throw down their weapons and run. Others fight with desperate fury, knowing that defeat means death or exile. But the heart has gone out of their cause. Without Robert's massive presence to anchor them, they are just scattered lords fighting for a lost dream. Lord Jon Arryn attempts to rally the men of the Vale, his weathered face grim beneath his falcon helm. "Form up!" he shouts to his knights. "We can still win this day." But even as he speaks, he knows the truth. The rebellion dies with Robert Baratheon in the bloody waters of the Trident. Hoster Tully sees the collapse beginning and makes the hardest decision of his life. He signals the retreat, his blue and red fish banners turning away from the field. The Lord of Riverrun will not throw away the lives of his men for a cause that died with the Stag of Storm's End. Rhaegar does not pursue the fleeing rebels with the savagery that some might expect. Instead, he calls for quarter to be given to those who surrender. His voice rings across the battlefield with authority that none can deny. "Enough blood has been spilled this day," he commands. "We are all men of Westeros." Sir Barristan Selmy rides to his prince's side, his sword still dripping red. "Your Grace," he says, the title coming easily to his lips. "What are your commands?" Rhaegar looks down at Robert's body floating in the crimson water. A part of him feels sorrow for the waste of it all. Robert Baratheon was a great warrior, and might have been a loyal lord in different circumstances. But the rebellion ends here, in this river, with this death. "Send ravens to King's Landing," Rhaegar says, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what has just occurred. "Tell my father that the rebellion is broken. Tell him that his son comes home victorious." But even as he gives the command, Rhaegar's thoughts turn south and east to a lonely tower in the red mountains of Dorne. Lyanna waits for him there, and he has promises to keep. The Iron Throne can wait another day. Love has already waited too long. The Battle of the Trident is over. The rebellion that began with a father's mad rage and a prince's desperate love has ended in the mud and blood of a river crossing. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen has claimed his victory, but the cost will echo through the Seven Kingdoms for generations to come. The dragon has won. Now comes the harder task of ruling what he has conquered. The battlefield grows quiet, save for the moans of wounded men and the splash of horses drinking from the bloodied Trident. Bodies float downstream like fallen leaves, their colours no longer distinguishing loyalist from rebel. The dragon banners of House Targaryen snap in the wind above the carnage, victorious but stained with the cost of victory. Ned Stark kneels beside Robert's body in the shallow water, his grey eyes filled with a grief too deep for tears. His friend's face looks peaceful beneath the dented helm, as if Robert has finally found rest from the rage that drove him to war. The rubies from Rhaegar's armour glitter in the mud around them, scattered like drops of frozen blood. "My lord," says Sir Roderick Castle, approaching with careful steps. His weathered face shows the strain of surviving the battle that claimed so many good men. "We must gather the living and decide our course." Ned rises slowly, water dripping from his armour. Around him, the remnants of the rebel army stand in scattered groups, their faces hollow with shock and defeat. These men followed Robert Baratheon into battle believing in their cause. Now their leader floats dead in the Trident, and their certainty has died with him. "Sound the retreat," Ned says, his voice hoarse from shouting commands during the battle. "Gather who you can. We make for the crossroads." But even as he gives the order, Ned knows the truth that every surviving rebel understands. The rebellion dies here, in this river, with Robert's last breath. Without the Stag of Storm's End to unite them, they are just scattered lords fighting a war they cannot win. Lord Jon Arryn sits his destrier on a rise overlooking the battlefield, his falcon banners drooping in the still air. His knights of the Vale cluster around him, their blue and white surcoats torn and bloodied from the day's fighting. The Lord of the Eyrie has seen 40 years of war and peace, but never has defeat tasted so bitter. "My lord," says Sir Dennis Arryn, his nephew and one of his most trusted knights, "what are your commands?" Jon Arryn studies the field where so many hopes have died. Rhaegar Targaryen moves among his men like a king already crowned, his silver hair catching the light as he tends to wounded enemies with the same care as his own soldiers. This is not the mad prince that Robert painted him to be. "We return to the Vale," Jon says finally. "Send word to the other lords. The war is over." "Over?" Dennis looks shocked. "My lord, we can still fight. We can die," Jon cuts him off. "Look around you, nephew. Look at what Robert's war has cost us. I will not spend more Vale blood on a dead cause." The hard truth settles over the knights like a shroud. They came to this battle believing they fought for justice against a mad king's tyranny. But it is their champion who lies dead in the water, and the dragon prince who shows mercy to his fallen enemies. Meanwhile, Hoster Tully makes his own bitter calculations as he watches his Riverlands bannermen tend their wounds. The Lord of Riverrun has always been a practical man, and practicality now demands retreat. His lands lie between King's Landing and the rebellious north. When Rhaegar marches on the capital, the Riverlands will become a battleground once again. "Send ravens to Riverrun," he commands his maester. "Tell my Castellan to prepare for a siege, and send word to every keep from the Twins to Harrenhal. The rebellion is broken." Lord Titus Blackwood approaches, his raven banners torn from the fighting. "My lord, shall we attempt to join with Lord Stark?" Hoster shakes his head. "Ned Stark is a good man, but he follows a dead cause now. I will not see the Riverlands burn for Robert Baratheon's ghost." Across the field, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen stands among his victorious army and feels the weight of kingship settling on his shoulders. The men who fought for him today look at him with something approaching reverence. He has given them victory against impossible odds, and they would follow him to the ends of the earth. "Bring me a raven," he commands Maester Cresson, who serves with the Loyalist forces. "I must send word to King's Landing." As the Maester prepares his writing materials, Rhaegar composes the message that will change the Seven Kingdoms forever. The words come easily, for they carry the weight of destiny. "To His Grace, heiress of House Targaryen, second of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm," Rhaegar dictates. "The rebellion is broken. Robert Baratheon is dead by my sword. The dragon banner flies victorious over the Trident. I march for King's Landing with all haste. Your faithful son, Rhaegar." The raven takes wing like a harbinger of the new age, carrying news that will echo through every castle and keep in Westeros. The usurper is dead. The dragon prince rides home in triumph. In the Red Keep, King Aerys, the second Targaryen, paces his solar like a caged beast, his fingernails grown long and sharp from months of nervous habit. The Targaryen madness burns bright in his violet eyes as he mutters to himself about traitors and conspiracies. When the raven arrives, he reads it 3 times before the words penetrate his paranoid mind. "Dead," he whispers, and then louder. "Dead! If the usurper is dead." But even in his moment of vindication, the Mad King's paranoia finds new targets. Why did Rhaegar wait so long to return from Dorne? Why did he allow the rebellion to go on for so many months? Perhaps his son staged the whole war to make himself appear a hero. Perhaps Rhaegar plans to use his victory to claim the throne for himself. "Guards!" Aerys shrieks. "Bring me Ser Jaime. I must know if my son remains loyal." The young knight of the King's Guard comes quickly, his golden hair bright in the torchlight. Jaime Lannister has served faithfully as the king's protector, but he has watched the madness grow stronger with each passing day. "Your Grace," Jaime says, offering a careful bow. "My son comes home victorious," Aerys says, his voice sharp with suspicion. "But does he come home loyal? Watch him, Ser Jaime. Watch him closely. If he shows any sign of treachery, The threat hangs unspoken in the air. Jaime nods, but his green eyes show no warmth for his king's paranoia. He has heard too many such ravings, seen too many innocents burn for imagined crimes. Far to the south, at Storm's End, Stannis Baratheon watches the sea from his solar window and waits for news that never seems to come. The siege has lasted months, and his supplies grow thin. His men look to him for leadership, but what can he tell them? That his brother fights a war that grows more hopeless with each passing day. When the raven arrives from Rhaegar's camp, Stannis reads it with the same stoic expression he wears for all news, good or ill. But something cold settles in his chest as he absorbs the words. "My lord," says Sir Davos Seaworth, his most trusted adviser. "What news?" "My brother is dead," Stannis says simply. "Robert fell at the Trident." The silence that follows speaks louder than any wailing could. Stannis sets the letter aside and looks out at the Targaryen fleet that has blockaded his castle for so long. He is Lord of Storm's End now, the last of the great rebels still standing, but he is also trapped, with no army and no allies. "Sir Davos," he says quietly, "prepare a white banner. We will treat with Prince Rhaegar." Back at the battlefield, the sun begins to set over the Trident, painting the water red as blood. The rebel army breaks apart like smoke in the wind, each lord taking his surviving men and making his own choice about the future. Some will flee to their castles and wait for Rhaegar's justice. Others will seek terms and hope for mercy. Rhaegar watches them go without pursuit. There has been enough killing for one day. His thoughts turn southward to a tower in Dorne where Lyanna waits. But first, he must claim his birthright and bring peace to a kingdom torn by war. "Mount up," he commands his army. "We ride for King's Landing. It is time for the dragon to come home." The loyalist host forms up behind their prince, 30,000 strong and flushed with victory. They have won more than a battle today. They have won the future of Westeros. As they begin their march toward the capital, the dragon banners catch the last light of day, and the kingdom holds its breath for what comes next. The King's Road stretches before Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, like a ribbon of conquest, winding through the green hills of the Riverlands toward the capital that awaits his return. His army moves in a long column that seems to have no end, 30,000 strong and growing larger with each passing day. Former rebels walk beside loyalist soldiers, their weapons surrendered, but their lives spared by the Dragon Prince's mercy. Rhaegar rides at the head of the column on his black destrier, his silver hair catching the morning light. The three-headed dragon of House Targaryen flies above him on banners that snap in the wind. But his violet eyes look beyond the road ahead to thoughts of towers and promises. Every league that brings him closer to King's Landing also takes him further from the woman he loves. Lyanna waits for him in Dorne, in that lonely tower where he left her with his most trusted knights. The memory of her face haunts his quiet moments, of the way her grey eyes flashed with defiance and desire when they first spoke at Harrenhal. He told her he would return after the war, told her their love would reshape the Seven Kingdoms. Now he rides home victorious, but the crown that awaits him feels heavier than any armor. "Your Grace," says Ser Barristan Selmy, riding up beside his prince. The knight's white cloak is still stained from the battle at the Trident, but his blue eyes remain clear and loyal. The scouts report that Lord Tully's forces have withdrawn across the Red Fork. They make no move to threaten our march. Rhaegar nods, but his mind is elsewhere. And what word from the north? "The ravens tell of chaos, Your Grace. Lord Stark has reached Winterfell, but he makes no declarations of surrender. The northern lords gather, but whether for war or council, so we cannot say. Behind them rides Prince Luwin Martell of Dorne, his orange and red banners bright in the sun. The Dornish prince survived the battle with only minor wounds, and his presence reminds Rhaegar of home and the woman who waits there. Lewin catches his nephew's eye and urges his horse forward. "Nephew," Lewin says, using the familial term that speaks to their Dornish blood. "You have the look of a man whose thoughts are far from this road." Rhaegar allows himself a small smile. Can a man not think of home after so long at war? A man can, Lewin agrees, but a king must think of his kingdom. The Seven Kingdoms have bled for this rebellion. They need to see their new ruler's strength, not his longing. The words sting because they carry truth. Rhaegar knows his duty, or knows that every choice he makes now will echo through generations. But love is not easily set aside, even for a crown. He has fought this war not for ambition, but to clear a path back to the woman who holds his heart. "Call a halt," Rhaegar commands. "We make camp here for the night. Summon the war council." As the army settles into the business of making camp, Rhaegar retreats to his pavilion with his most trusted advisors. Maps of the Seven Kingdoms spread across a wooden table, marked with the positions of loyal and rebel forces. Ravens wait in cages, ready to carry his commands across the realm. "The situation, sir," Rhaegar says to Ser Barristan. The knight traces the borders with a weathered finger. Storm's End still holds, but Stannis Baratheon has sent word requesting terms. The Reach remains loyal, though some houses waver. The Westerlands keep their own counsel, but Tywin Lannister has made no move against us. "And my father?" Ser Barristan hesitates. His grace grows impatient. "The ravens from King's Landing speak of preparations for your return, but also of suspicions. He questions why the war lasted so long." Rhaegar feels the familiar weight of his father's madness settling on his shoulders. Aerys II sees conspiracies in every shadow, treachery in every delay. The old king will not celebrate his son's victory without finding fault in its execution. "We must move carefully when we reach the capital," Rhaegar says. "My father's mind has grown dark in recent years. He may see threats where none exist." Prince Lewin leans forward. "And what of the girl?" "Lyanna Stark remains in Dorne, guarded by Arthur and the others. When will you bring her to court?" The question hangs in the air like smoke from a brazier. Rhaegar knows that Lyanna's presence at court would inflame every northern lord and complicate every negotiation. But he also knows that he cannot rule without her beside him. She is not merely his love, but his destiny. "After I have secured the throne," Rhaegar says finally, "when the realm has accepted my rule, then I will bring her home." A raven arrives as they speak, carried by a maester who bows low before presenting the message. Rhaegar breaks the seal and reads quickly, his expression growing grim. "What news?" Ser Barristan asks. "From the north," Rhaegar says. "Ned Stark has called his banners. He refuses all terms and speaks of justice for his father and brother. The wolf may yet have teeth." The War Council exchanges glances. They had hoped that Robert's death would end all resistance, but the North has always been a stubborn realm. The Starks rule by love as much as fear, and their bannermen are fiercely loyal. "How many men can he raise?" Prince Lewin asks. 20,000, perhaps more if he calls in every favor, Ser Barristan estimates. But they would have to march south to threaten us, and winter approaches. The North has never been conquered by force of arms alone. Rhaegar studies the map, tracing the long road from King's Landing to Winterfell. The distance is vast, and any army that marches that far will arrive weakened and tired. But Ned Stark knows his own lands better than any southern lord. If he chooses to fight, it will be a long and bloody campaign. "Send a raven south," Rhaegar decides, "to the Tower of Joy. Or tell Sir Arthur that events in the north may require adjustments to our plans." The message is deliberately vague, but Arthur Dayne will understand. The Sword of the Morning has served House Targaryen faithfully for years, and he knows the importance of the woman he guards. If the North rises in rebellion, Lyanna's safety becomes even more critical. As evening falls, the army gathers around cooking fires that stretch along the King's Road like fallen stars. Former rebels share meals with loyalist soldiers, finding common ground in their shared survival of the Trident. Rhaegar walks among them, listening to their stories and showing them the face of their new king. "Your Grace," says a young knight who once followed Robert Baratheon, "will there be pardons for those who fought against you?" Rhaegar stops, to studying the young man's earnest face. This is why he fights, for moments like these, when mercy can heal wounds that steel alone cannot touch. "Every man here has earned his pardon through surrender," Rhaegar says, his voice carrying to the soldiers nearby. "The realm has bled enough. When I sit the Iron Throne, I will rule for all the 7 kingdoms, not merely for those who supported my cause." The words spread through the camp like wildfire, and Rhaegar sees the change in the men's faces. These are not conquered enemies, but subjects who have chosen to follow their new king. It is a small thing, but kingdoms are built from such small moments of trust. Later, as the camp settles into sleep, Rhaegar stands outside his pavilion and looks south toward dawn. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Lyanna waits in her tower prison that is also a sanctuary. He has promised her a new world, one where love conquers the ancient hatreds of the 7 kingdoms. Tomorrow they will reach the outskirts of King's Landing, and he will face his father for the first time since leaving for Dorne. The Mad King will demand explanations, suspect treacheries, and test his son's loyalty with every word. But Rhaegar has won more than a battle at the Trident. He has won the right to reshape Westeros according to his own vision. The dragon banner above his pavilion catches the moonlight, its 3 heads seeming to move in the gentle wind. Soon that banner will fly above the Red Keep, and the prophecies will begin to unfold. The prince that was promised rides toward his destiny, carrying the hopes of a realm and the memory of a woman's love. King's Landing awaits, and with it, the throne that will make all his dreams possible. The gates of King's Landing swing open before Prince Rhaegar Targaryen like the jaws of a great beast welcoming its master home. The city explodes into celebration as word spreads that the Dragon Prince has returned victorious from the Trident. Thousands of small folk line the streets, throwing flower petals and cheering his name until their voices echo off the stone walls like thunder. Rhaegar rides through the crowds on his black destrier, his silver hair shining in the afternoon sun. The 3-headed dragon banners of House Targaryen snap proudly in the wind above him, and behind follows an army that has tasted victory against the greatest rebellion in living memory. But even as the city celebrates, Rhaegar's violet eyes remain fixed on the Red Keep ahead, where his father waits. "Your Grace," calls out a butcher, holding his young son high to see the prince. "You've saved us all from the usurper." The words follow Rhaegar up the winding streets of the capital, each cheer and blessing adding weight to the crown he has yet to claim. These people see him as their savior, the prince who ended Robert's war before it could consume the realm entirely. But Rhaegar knows that the hardest battle still lies ahead, in the throne room where madness wears a crown. The Red Keep looms before them, its red stone walls seeming to bleed in the late afternoon light. Guards in Targaryen colors snap to attention as the prince approaches, their faces showing relief that borders on worship. But for months, they have served a king whose grip on sanity grows weaker with each passing day. Now their true prince has come home. In the throne room, King Aerys II Targaryen paces before the Iron Throne like a caged dragon, his wild silver hair hanging in greasy strands past his shoulders. His fingernails have grown long and yellow, and his purple eyes burn with the fire of madness that has consumed his mind. When the great doors boom open and Rhaegar enters, Aerys stops his pacing and fixes his son with a stare that could melt steel. "So," Aerys says, his voice carrying the edge of suspicion that has become his constant companion. The prodigal prince returns. "Tell me, my son, Why did it take you so long to end this rebellion? Why did you let the realm bleed while you played at war in the Riverlands? Rhaegar approaches the throne with careful steps, his hand resting lightly on the pommel of his sword. Around them, the court watches in tense silence, knowing that the next few moments will determine the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. "I came as quickly as I could, Your Grace," Rhaegar says, his voice steady, despite the accusation in his father's words. "The rebels fought fiercely, and it took time to gather sufficient forces to crush them decisively." "Time!" Aerys shrieks, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. "Or perhaps you needed time to let your enemies weaken the crown. Perhaps you hoped they would kill your mad father and leave you free to rule without the burden of kinslaying." The court draws back at the words, and several lords exchange worried glances. This is worse than anyone had feared. The king's paranoia has turned even against his own son, the prince who has just won the greatest victory in Targaryen history. Lord Tywin Lannister steps forward from the crowd of courtiers, his green eyes calculating as he reads the dangerous mood in the throne room. The hand of the king has served the crown faithfully for years, but he knows madness when he sees it. "Your Grace," Tywin says in his calm, measured voice. "Prince Rhaegar has returned victorious. Surely this is cause for celebration, not suspicion." Aerys whirls on his hand with wild eyes. "Do not tell me what to think, Tywin. I know treachery when I see it. My son disappears to dawn for months, lets rebels run wild across my kingdom, and only returns when victory is assured. Where is the loyalty in that?" Rhaegar feels the weight of every gaze in the throne room, knows that his next words will echo through history. The court needs to see strength, not the weakness that comes from arguing with a madman. His father's accusations sting because they hold just enough truth to wound. "I have brought you Robert Baratheon's head, father," Rhaegar says, his voice carrying across the throne room. "I have broken the rebellion that threatened your crown. If that is not loyalty, then the word has lost all meaning." But even as he speaks, Rhaegar can see that reason will not reach his father. The Mad King's paranoia has grown too strong, fed by months of isolation and fear. Aerys sees enemies everywhere, and now even his own son appears tainted by suspected treachery. Sir Jaime Lannister watches from his position near the throne, his golden hair bright in the torchlight. The young knight's green eyes move between father and son, reading the tension that threatens to tear the realm apart. At 19 years old, Jaime has sworn to protect the king. But which king deserves protection when madness and sanity stand in opposition? "Leave us," Rhaegar commands, his voice carrying new authority. "Everyone except Ser Jaime. I would speak with my father, alone." The court files out slowly, reluctant to miss what might be the most important conversation in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. Lord Tywin hesitates at the door, but finally follows the others into the corridors beyond. Only the prince, the king, and the young Kingsguard remain in the vast throne room. "You see?" Aerys hisses, as soon as they are alone. "Even now you give commands in your father's presence. You think yourself king already." Rhaegar moves closer to the Iron Throne, studying his father's haggard face. Once, Aerys II had been a handsome man, silver-haired and regal. Now madness has twisted his features into something wild and dangerous. "I think myself your son," Rhaegar says quietly. "And as your son, I have duties that go beyond simple obedience. One of those duties is to protect the realm you have entrusted to me." "The realm is mine," Aerys shrieks, spittle flying from his lips. "Mine by right of blood and conquest. You have no claim while I live." "Then live," Rhaegar replies, his voice steady as steel. "Live and rule wisely, and I will serve faithfully at your side. But if you cannot rule, father, oh, then someone must." The words hang in the air like smoke from wildfire, dangerous and impossible to take back. Jaime's hand moves instinctively toward his sword, though whether to protect the king from his son or the son from his king, he could not say. Aerys stares at Rhaegar with eyes that burn like purple flames, and for a moment the throne room is silent except for the king's ragged breathing. Then, slowly, something seems to break inside the Mad King. The fire goes out of his eyes, replaced by something that might be recognition or fear. "You would cage me," Aerys whispers. "Your own father, caged like a beast." "I would protect you," Rhaegar corrects, "from enemies who would use your condition against the crown. Let me bear the burden of kingship, father. Rest, and let the realm heal." Over the following days, and the transition happens with surprising smoothness, lords who have served the crown faithfully rally to Rhaegar's banner, seeing in him the stability that the realm desperately needs. The Mad King retreats to his chambers, guarded always by loyal men who ensure his comfort and safety. The coronation takes place a week after Rhaegar's return, in the Sept of Baelor, before the greatest lords of the Seven Kingdoms. The High Septon places the crown of Aegon the Conqueror on Rhaegar's silver head, while thousands watch and cheer. In a high window of the Red Keep, Aerys watches his son become king, his purple eyes unreadable. "Hear me," Rhaegar calls out from the steps of the Sept, his voice carrying across the crowd. "I am Rhaegar of House Targaryen, first of my name, king of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, a lord of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the realm." The crowd roars its approval, but Rhaegar raises his hand for silence. "Let it be known that mercy shall be the cornerstone of my reign. All lords who lay down their arms and swear fealty to the Iron Throne shall receive full pardons, but those who continue to resist the crown will face the full might of the Seven Kingdoms." As he speaks, ravens carry his words to every corner of Westeros. In the north, Ned Stark reads the proclamation with grim understanding. In the Vale, Jon Arryn weighs his options carefully. At Storm's End, Stannis Baratheon prepares to bend the knee to the new Dragon King. But even as Rhaegar claims his crown, his thoughts turn southward to Dorne and the woman who waits for him there. Lyanna has heard of his victory by now, knows that the path to their future is finally clear. Soon, very soon, he will bring her home and make her his queen. The reign of King Rhaegar I has begun, born from the ashes of rebellion and tempered by the fires of war. The Seven Kingdoms have a new ruler, one who promises to heal the wounds that his father's madness inflicted. But in the north, wolves still howl defiance, and the Game of Thrones is far from over. The dragon sits the Iron Throne at last, but keeping it will prove harder than winning it. The journey back to Winterfell stretches before Ned Stark like a wound that refuses to heal. Each mile north takes him further from the battlefield where Robert Baratheon died. But the memory of his friend's blood in the Trident's waters follows him like a shadow. The roads are muddy from autumn rains, and the small party of northern survivors moves in silence, broken only by the sound of horses' hooves and the distant cry of ravens. Ned rides at the head of his men, ice across his back and grief heavy in his heart. The great Valyrian steel sword of House Stark feels heavier now, weighted with the responsibility of lordship that he never wanted. His father Rickard and brother Brandon lie dead in King's Landing, murdered by the Mad King's cruelty, and now Robert joins them in death. The rebellion that began with such hope has crumbled like leaves before winter's wind. "My lord," says Sir Roderick Castle, riding up beside his young lord. The Master-at-Arms has served House Stark faithfully for decades, and his weathered face shows the strain of recent defeats. The scouts report no pursuit. It seems King Rhaegar keeps his word about allowing safe passage for those who retreat. Ned nods but says nothing. Rhaegar's mercy feels more like mockery to a man who has lost everything he held dear. The Dragon Prince speaks of healing the realm's wounds, but some wounds cut too deep for mercy to mend. The familiar towers of Winterfell rise from the northern landscape, like old friends welcoming him home. But even the sight of his ancestral seat cannot lift the darkness from Ned's heart. This castle has been home to Starks for 8,000 years, but now it falls to him to determine whether that lineage will survive the next 8 months. Catelyn waits for him in the great hall, her tully auburn hair catching the firelight. She is heavy with child, their first son growing in her belly, and her blue eyes show both relief and sorrow when she sees her husband's face. They have been married less than a year, bound together by political necessity during the rebellion, but something deeper has grown between them. "Ned," she says, rising from her chair with some difficulty, "thank the Seven you've returned safely." He crosses the hall in quick strides and takes her hands, feeling the warmth of life in her touch. "Cat, how do you fare? How does the child?" "Well enough," she replies, studying his face for signs of the battle's outcome. "But you look like a man who brings grave news." "Robert, dead," Ned says simply, the word falling between them like a stone into still water. "Rhaegar killed him at the Trident. The rebellion is broken." Catelyn's face pales, but she shows the strength that made her a worthy lady of Winterfell. "And what of us? What of the North?" Before Ned can answer, the great hall begins to fill with northern lords who have come to Winterfell upon hearing of their liege lord's return. Lord Rickard Umber arrives first, his massive frame filling the doorway as he strides across the stone floor. Behind him come Lord Roose Bolton of the Dreadfort, his pale eyes unreadable as always, and Sir Jorah Mormont of Bear Island, still young but already bearing the scars of battle. "Lord Stark," rumbles the Great John, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. "We've heard dark rumors from the south. Tell us true. What news from the Trident?" Ned stands before his bannermen, feeling the weight of their expectations. These men have served House Stark with unwavering loyalty for generations. Their fathers died with his father in King's Landing. Their brothers fought beside him at the Trident. Now they look to him for leadership in the darkest hour their house has faced since the Age of Heroes. "Robert Baratheon is dead," Ned announces, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "Killed in single combat with Prince Rhaegar. Our armies are scattered. Our allies have bent the knee to the Iron Throne. Jon Arryn retreats to the Vale, and Hoster Tully seeks terms with the Dragon King." Silence greets his words, thick as smoke from a dying fire. Then Lord Karstark speaks up, his voice tight with anger. "And what does this Dragon Prince demand of the North? Does he expect us to forget the murder of your father and brother?" "He offers pardons to all who submit," Ned replies. "Full restoration of lands and titles for those who swear fealty to his crown. He speaks of mercy and healing, but the blood of Starks still stains his father's hands." "Mercy," spits the Great John. "Where was mercy when Brandon was strangled with wire? Where was mercy when your father burned alive in his own armor? The dragons speak of mercy only after they've won." Murmurs of agreement ripple through the assembled lords, and Ned can see the fire of defiance burning in their eyes. The North has always been different from the southern kingdoms, bound more by honor and personal loyalty than by fear of royal power. These men would follow him into the depths of the other's realm if he asked it. Demeister Luwin steps forward from his place by the hearth, his grey robes rustling softly. The old man has served 3 generations of Starks, and his weathered face shows the wisdom of long years. "My lord, perhaps we should consider our options carefully. The North is strong, but we cannot stand alone against the combined might of the 7 kingdoms." "The North has stood alone before," Lord Umber growls. "When the Andals came with their 7-pointed stars, when the Targaryens first flew here on their dragons. Stark kings ruled from this very hall for thousands of years before any southern lord ever bent the knee." Roose Bolton's quiet voice cuts through the discussion like a blade through silk. But those Stark kings are dust now, my lord, and the dragons are very much alive. Perhaps Lord Lewin speaks wisdom, as a living lord can serve his people better than a dead hero. The words create a division in the hall that Ned can feel like a physical thing. Some lords nod at Bolton's pragmatic counsel, while others glare at him with barely concealed disgust. The unity of the North hangs by a thread, and Ned knows that his next words will determine whether that thread holds or snaps. I have lost my father, my brother, and my best friend to Targaryen madness, Ned says, his voice growing stronger with each word. I have seen good men die for the promise of justice, only to watch their killers crowned as kings. If Rhaegar Targaryen wants the North's submission, he can come and take it. The hall erupts in cheers, and the ring of steel as lords draw their swords in salute. The Great John's booming laughter drowns out more cautious voices, and even Rose Bolton's pale lips twitch into something that might be a smile. Catelyn watches her husband with pride and terror in equal measure, knowing that he has just declared war on the Iron Throne itself. "What would you have us do, my lord?" asks Ser Jorah Mormont. "Gather the banners," Ned commands. "Send ravens to every keep from the wall to the neck. The North remembers what the dragons have done, and the North will have justice. We may not be able to march south and take the Iron Throne, but we can make them pay dearly for every league of northern soil they claim." Over the following days, Winterfell becomes a hive of activity as ravens fly north and west, carrying Ned's call to arms. From White Harbour comes word that Lord Manderley will answer the call with ships and men. The mountain clans promise to fight with stone and steel, while the lords of the western shores pledge their longships to the cause. But even as the North prepares for war, troubling news arrives from the south. Refugees from the riverlands bring tales of Rhaegar's march through the countryside, speaking of the new king's justice and mercy. Some tell of lords who resisted being hanged from the walls of their own castles, while others whisper of former rebels who now serve in positions of honor at the Dragon King's court. "He's clever, this Dragon Prince," Catelyn observes as she and Ned walk the battlements of Winterfell. He offers the carrot and the stick in equal measure. Those who submit are rewarded, those who resist are destroyed. "And what of those who cannot submit?" Ned asks, his hand resting on the pommel of ice. "What of those whose honor forbids them to kneel before their family's murderer?" Catelyn takes his arm, feeling their child move restlessly in her belly. Then they fight and pray to the old gods and the new that their cause is just. A raven arrives from the Vale, bearing Jon Arryn's careful words. The Lord of the Eyrie speaks of difficult choices and the need to preserve what can be saved. He will not openly support the North's rebellion, but neither will he hinder it. It is as much as Ned can hope for from his former guardian, and perhaps more than he deserves. The first clash comes sooner than expected. Targaryen scouts probe the borders of the North, testing the Stark defenses and gauging their strength. A small party of royal cavalry meets a larger force of northern mounted infantry near the Twins. Oars and steel rings against steel for the first time since the Trident. The Northmen fight with desperate fury, knowing that their homes and families depend on their courage. They drive off the southern knights, capturing several and sending the rest fleeing back across the Green Fork. But the message is clear to both sides. The war for the North has begun. In his solar that night, Ned stares at the maps spread across his desk and tries to calculate how long they can hold out. The North is vast and difficult to conquer, but it is also sparsely populated and far from any allies. Rhaegar can draw on the resources of 6 kingdoms, while Ned has only the strength of 1. But as he looks out his window at the Godswood where his ancestors have prayed for generations, Ned feels a grim determination settle in his chest. Of the North has survived the Long Night, the Andal invasion, and the Targaryen conquest. It will survive this too, or die trying. Winter is coming, and with it, the Dragon King's reckoning. But the wolves of Winterfell will not go gentle into that good night. The ancient walls of Storm's End rise from the cliffs like a testament to Durin Godsgrief's defiance of the gods themselves. For months, the castle has withstood the siege that followed Robert's rebellion, its massive stones weathering both Targaryen catapults and autumn storms with equal indifference. But within those walls, Lord Stannis Baratheon knows that time runs short for the defenders who have held out far longer than anyone thought possible. Standing on the battlements, Stannis watches the Targaryen fleet that blockades Shipbreaker Bay, with their black and red sails snapping in the salt wind. Below the castle walls, siege engines crowd the field like great wooden beasts, their crews working day and night to breach the fortress that has never fallen to assault. The thunder of stones against stone echoes across the Stormlands, but still the walls hold. "My lord," says Sir Davos Seaworth, approaching with the careful step of a man who brings unwelcome news. The former smuggler has served Stannis faithfully throughout the siege, and his weathered face shows the strain of months without proper supply. "The stores grow thin. We have perhaps a fortnight's food remaining, and that if we cut rations again." Stannis nods grimly, his jaw set like granite. Since word came of Robert's death at the Trident, he has known this moment would arrive. But his brother's war died with him in the Trident's waters, but Stannis has held Storm's End, not from hope of victory, but from sheer bloody-minded duty to the house that raised these walls. "And the men?" he asks. "Loyal," Davos replies without hesitation. "They would follow you into the Seven Hells if you asked it. But they are hungry, my lord, and some whisper that continuing this fight serves only pride, not a purpose." Before Stannis can respond, a commotion rises from the main gate. Trumpets sound across the siege lines, their bronze voices carrying a tune that makes every defender's blood run cold. The three-headed dragon of House Targaryen appears on banners streaming in the wind, and beneath them rides a column of knights whose armor gleams like silver fire in the morning sun. King Rhaegar I Targaryen has come to Storm's End. The Dragon King rides a white destrier that prances beneath him like a creature from legend, and his silver hair catches the light as he surveys the siege works that surround the ancient castle. Behind him march 20,000 fresh troops, drawn from the Reach and the Crownlands, their weapons sharp and their spirits high from the victories at the Trident and King's Landing. "Summon the War Council," Rhaegar commands as he dismounts before his pavilion. The great tent bears the Targaryen arms worked in silk and gold, and within it maps and battle plans cover every surface. "I want to know the exact state of their defences before we proceed." Sir Barristan Selmy bows low, his white cloak pristine, despite the long march from the capital. "Your Grace, our scouts report that the garrison grows weak. They have endured this siege with remarkable tenacity, but even Baratheon's stubbornness has limits." "Stubbornness born of honor," Rhaegar corrects, studying the massive walls that have defied his forces for so long. Stannis Baratheon may have followed his brother into rebellion, but he has proven himself a worthy defender. Such men deserve respect, even in defeat. Lord Mace Tyrell, who commands the forces from the Reach, shifts uncomfortably at his king's words. The Lord of Highgarden has little patience for rebels who prolong hopeless causes, but he knows better than to contradict his sovereign. "Your Grace, shall we prepare for a final assault? My men are eager to see this siege concluded." Rhaegar considers the question while studying the reports his commanders have prepared. Storm's End has cost them time and resources they can ill afford, especially with word arriving daily of continued resistance in the north. But the strategic importance of the Stormlands cannot be denied, and Stannis Baratheon's submission would send a powerful message to other potential rebels. "First we try words," the king decides. "If Stannis Baratheon can be brought to heel through negotiation, we save both time and lives. If not..." He leaves the threat unspoken, but every man in the pavilion understands. The parley takes place beneath the walls of Storm's End, with both sides maintaining careful distance while their leaders meet under banners of truce. Stannis descends from his castle with a small guard, his face showing no emotion as he approaches the Dragon King who has claimed his brother's throne. "Lord Stannis," Rhaegar greets him, offering a respectful nod. "You have defended your castle with honor that would make your brother proud. But surely you see that further resistance serves no purpose save bloodshed." Stannis studies the young king with eyes like chips of blue ice, measuring the man who killed Robert in single combat. Rhaegar appears every inch the warrior prince that songs celebrate, but Stannis has always trusted deeds more than appearances. "You offer terms?" Stannis asks, his voice carrying no warmth but no hostility either. "Or do you simply demand surrender?" "I offer justice tempered with mercy," Rhaegar replies. "Swear fealty to the Iron Throne, and Storm's End remains yours. Your lands, your titles, your men, all preserved if you will but acknowledge me as your rightful king." The offer hangs in the air between them like smoke from a dying fire. Both men know the weight of this moment, know that Stannis' decision will echo through the Seven Kingdoms, and perhaps determine how long the realm bleeds from rebellion's wounds. "My brother died believing you a usurper," Stannis says slowly. "He claimed you stole his bride and murdered his love. Why should I trust the word of a man he named kidnapper and oathbreaker?" Rhaegar's violet eyes show pain at the accusation, but his voice remains steady. "Because I offer you the truth that pride prevented your brother from accepting. Lyanna Stark came with me willingly, drawn by love that your brother mistook for abduction. Or the war that followed was built on misunderstanding as much as malice." "Pretty words," Stannis replies, "but words do not raise the dead or heal the wounds this war has opened. What surety do you offer that your mercy extends beyond this moment?" In response, Rhaegar draws his sword, not in threat, but to offer its hilt to the Lord of Storm's End. The blade that killed Robert Baratheon gleams in the afternoon light, its edge still sharp with recent victory. "By my sword and my crown, I swear that House Baratheon shall know honor in my service," Rhaegar declares. "Your counsel will be welcomed, your lands protected, your people cherished as my own. This I pledge before gods and men." Stannis stares at the offered weapon for a long moment, weighing duty against pride, pragmatism against the memory of his brother's corpse floating in the Trident. Around them, two armies watch and wait for a decision that will determine whether more blood waters the Stormland's soil. Finally, slowly, Stannis takes the sword's hilt in his own hand. The gesture creates a bond stronger than words, a pact between king and lord that neither man enters lightly. "I, Stannis of House Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, do hereby swear fealty to Rhaegar of House Targaryen, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the first men," he declares, his voice carrying across the field. "I pledge my sword, my lands, and my life to his service, and call upon all present to witness this oath." The words strike the assembled armies like thunder, bringing cheers from Targaryen forces and stunned silence from the defenders of Storm's End. Many of Stannis' men had prepared themselves for a glorious death in the castle's defense, but their lord has chosen pragmatic survival over heroic sacrifice. "Rise, my lord," Rhaegar says, returning the sword with ceremonial flourish. "Your wisdom in choosing peace over pointless bloodshed honors both our houses. The realm needs lords who understand that true courage sometimes lies in knowing when to yield." As Stannis returns to Storm's End to order the castle's surrender, Rhaegar watches from his pavilion and feels a mixture of triumph and regret. Each victory brings him closer to true dominion over the Seven Kingdoms, but also further from the woman who waits for him in Dawn. The crown grows heavier with each lord who bends the knee, or weighted with the responsibilities of ruling a realm still bleeding from war's wounds. Sir Davos Seaworth oversees the formal surrender, ensuring that Baratheon forces lay down their arms in good order. The former smuggler understands his lord's choice, recognizes the practical wisdom in preserving what can be saved, rather than sacrificing everything for the memory of the dead. "You served loyally," he tells the garrison as they file past. "Your lord has secured your futures with his wisdom. Be grateful that he values your lives more than his pride." The strategic implications of Storm's End's fall spread rapidly through the Seven Kingdoms. Ravens carry word north to Winterfell, where Ned Stark receives the news with grim understanding that his rebellion grows more isolated with each passing day. In the Vale, Jon Arryn weighs the message carefully and finds his position growing more precarious. But in Rhaegar's tent that night, the new king's thoughts turn once again to Dawn and the woman whose love sparked this entire war. Each victory brings him closer to the peace that will allow him to bring Lyanna home, but also costs precious time that love cannot easily spare. "Your Grace," Sir Barristan ventures as he reports on the day's events. "With the Stormland secured, what are your plans for the remaining rebels?" Rhaegar studies the maps that show the positions of his various armies, calculating distances and supply lines with the eye of a commander who has learned war's harsh lessons. The north remains defiant, but winter approaches and distances work against any northern offensive. Time, he realizes, may be his greatest ally in the campaigns to come. "We consolidate our gains," he decides. "Let the north feel the weight of isolation, while we strengthen our position. When spring comes, we will deal with the wolves of Winterfell. Until then, we give them time to reconsider their defiance." The siege of Storm's End ends not with the clash of steel or the thunder of falling stones, but with the wisdom of a lord who chose duty to his people over vengeance for his brother. In the great Game of Thrones, it proves once again that the most decisive victories often come not from the sword, but from the choices men make when honor conflicts with survival. Winter's breath grows stronger in the north as the first snows dust the battlements of Winterfell, and with the cold comes a different kind of war than any the Seven Kingdoms have seen. No great armies clash in open battle, no banners fly proudly over conquered fields. Instead, shadows move through the forests, and wolves strike without warning, then melt away into the grey wilderness that stretches beyond the neck. Lord Jon Umber leads his men through the thick woods south of Last Hearth, their breath misting in the cold air as they track the Targaryen supply column that dares to venture into the north. The Great Jon's massive frame moves with surprising quiet through the undergrowth, and his eyes burn with the fierce joy of a man who has found his element in this shadow war. "There," he whispers to his lieutenant, pointing through the trees at the baggage train that winds along the forest road. 50 men, maybe more, but half of them green boys from the Reach who've never seen a northern winter. They won't know what hit them until it's too late. The Umbers strike like their namesake bears, roaring out of the forest with axes and swords that gleam in the pale sunlight. The southern soldiers scramble for weapons they cannot reach fast enough, and their screams echo through the trees as northern steel finds its mark. Within minutes, the supply train burns and scattered survivors flee south with tales of northern wolves that hunt in packs. Similar raids occur across the borderlands as northern lords adapt to a new kind of warfare. Lord Karstark's men ambush messenger ravens at their roosts, while the mountain clans use their knowledge of hidden paths to strike at camps thought secure behind Targaryen lines. Each attack costs the crown men and supplies it can ill afford to lose, and more importantly, each victory feeds the flame of resistance that burns in northern hearts. In the Red Keep, King Rhaegar, the first Targaryen, stares at the growing pile of reports that tell the same story again and again. His armies control the major roads and castles of the north, but the land itself remains hostile, populated by ghosts who strike without warning and vanish like morning mist. "How many men did we lose this week?" he asks Grandmeister Pycelle, his violet eyes showing the strain of a war that refuses to end cleanly. The old man shuffles through his papers with trembling fingers, his chain of office rattling softly in the quiet solar. 47 confirmed dead, Your Grace, with another 60 wounded or missing. And that is only what the ravens have reported. Oh, the true count may be higher. Sir Barristan Selmy stands at attention beside the Iron Throne, his white cloak pristine, but his weathered face grave. Your Grace, perhaps it is time to consider a different approach. These northern lords fight like bandits, not honorable knights. We cannot defeat shadows with conventional tactics. What do you counsel? Rhaegar asks, though he suspects he already knows the answer. Offer terms to individual houses, Barristan suggests carefully. Drive wedges between the northern lords. Not all of them share Ned Stark's appetite for a hopeless war. Some might be willing to abandon his cause if the price is right. The suggestion hangs in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Rhaegar knows the wisdom of it, or understands that dividing his enemies has always been more effective than crushing them through brute force. But something in him recoils from the idea of turning the loyal bonds of the North against themselves. Send ravens, he decides finally, to houses, Dustin, Ricewell, and Serwyn. Offer full pardons and restoration of any seized lands. Let them know that my mercy extends to all who would accept it, regardless of their past allegiances. The ravens fly north like black harbingers of division, carrying offers that will test the unity that has kept the Northern Rebellion alive through months of hardship. At Barrowton, Lady Barbary Dustin reads the royal decree with calculating eyes, weighing the benefits of submission against the costs of continued defiance. In her solar, she discusses the offer with her advisers, to men who remember the days when her house prospered under royal favor. The Dragon King offers much, she admits. Full pardons, confirmed lordships, even a place at his court for those who prove their loyalty. And what of Lord Stark? Asks her aged Maester. What of the oaths sworn at Winterfell? Lady Dustin considers the question carefully. The Starks have led the North for thousands of years, but they have also led it into a war that grows more hopeless with each passing day. Winter approaches, and soon the North will face enemies far more dangerous than southern armies. Send word to King's Landing, she decides. House Dustin accepts the royal pardon and swears renewed fealty to the Iron Throne. Similar decisions echo across the North as practical lords weigh survival against honor. House Ricewell follows Dustin's lead, as does House Serwyn after a painful family council that splits father from son. Each defection weakens the northern cause and sends ripples of doubt through the remaining loyalist houses. At Winterfell, Ned Stark receives word of the defections with the stoic calm that has become his constant companion. He stands in the godswood before the heart tree, its red leaves rustling in the cold wind as if the old gods themselves whisper warnings of betrayal. 3 houses, Catelyn says, as she joins him beneath the weirwood's pale branches. Her pregnancy shows more clearly now, and she moves with the careful grace of a woman who carries precious cargo. Perhaps more will follow if this continues. Perhaps, Ned agrees, his hand resting on the pommel of ice. Fear makes men practical, and we have given them much to fear. But the North remembers more than fear. It remembers honor and the price of broken oaths. To prove his point, Ned calls his remaining bannermen to Winterfell for a gathering that will either strengthen their resolve or reveal how deep the rot of doubt has spread. Lords arrive from across the North, their faces grim but their weapons sharp, ready to hear their liege lord's words. In the great hall of Winterfell, Ned addresses the assembled lords with the quiet authority that has defined his leadership. Some among you may wonder if our cause serves any purpose beyond pride, he begins, his voice carrying clearly through the ancient stones. You may ask whether northern blood should water southern ambitions, whether honor is worth the price we pay. The hall listens in tense silence, every man present weighing his own doubts against the loyalty that brought him here. These are practical men who understand the costs of war, but they are also Northmen who value their word more than their lives. I will tell you what the North remembers, Ned continues, his grey eyes moving across their faces. We remember that Rhaegar Targaryen murdered my father and brother without trial or mercy. We remember that his son now wears the crown built on their ashes. And we remember that some stains cannot be washed away with pardons or gold. Lord Karstark steps forward, his weathered face showing the scars of recent battles. The Karstarks stand with Winterfell, he declares. Until the last of us falls, we will remember. One by one, the other lords repeat similar oaths, as each man choosing honor over expediency, despite the costs they all understand too well. The great hall rings with declarations of loyalty that strengthen the bonds holding the Northern Rebellion together. But even as Ned rebuilds the unity of his cause, darker forces move in the shadows. In King's Landing, a meeting takes place in chambers far from the throne room, where men speak in whispers about solutions that honorable kings cannot publicly endorse. The northern problem requires a northern solution, says a voice whose owner prefers to remain unnamed. Remove Ned Stark, and the rebellion dies with him. The other lords will submit quickly enough once their leader is dead. Plans take shape in the darkness, and gold changes hands to purchase the services of men whose loyalty can be bought. A blade in the night, 'tis a cup of poisoned wine, an arrow from the crowd. There are many ways to kill a lord who trusts too easily in honor. The attempt comes on a cold night, when Ned walks alone from the Godswood to his chambers, his mind heavy with the weight of leadership and the approaching winter. The assassin waits in the shadows of the covered bridge, his blade sharp and his movements silent as falling snow. But ice rings clear in the night air as Ned's instincts save his life, the great Valyrian steel blade turning aside the killer's thrust. The brief fight that follows ends with the assassin dead and questions that will haunt both sides of the war. Northern make, Maester Luwin observes as he examines the assassin's weapons. But the gold in his purse bears the dragon's head. Someone in King's Landing wanted you dead, my lord, and they were willing to pay northern turncoats to achieve it. Word of the assassination attempt spreads quickly through both camps, hardening positions on both sides. In the north, it proves that Rhaegar's mercy has limits, and his honor may be less pure than his supporters claim. In the south, it demonstrates that the Northern Rebellion will not die easily, and may require harsher measures than anyone has yet contemplated. Winter deepens around the Seven Kingdoms, and with it comes the understanding that this shadow war in the north cannot continue indefinitely. Something must give way, either northern resistance or royal patience, and when it does, the realm will discover once again that the Game of Thrones is played for the highest stakes of all. The wolves of the north continue their howling defiance, but even the fiercest predators must eventually face the dragon's fire. The only question is how much blood will stain the snow before peace finally comes to the Seven Kingdoms. The eyrie perches on its mountain peak like a falcon's nest carved from the living stone, so high that clouds drift past its towers, and the world below seems distant as a half-remembered dream. In the throne room, known as the Sky Cells, Lord Jon Arryn stands before the ancient seat of House Arryn and contemplates choices that will echo through the Seven Kingdoms, like thunder rolling between the peaks. Winter winds howl around the mountain fortress, bringing word from the world below that grows darker with each raven's arrival. The north bleeds from a dozen wounds, while Ned Stark's rebellion crumbles piece by piece, and now Targaryen armies march through the Vale of Arryn itself, their dragon banners snapping in the mountain air like threats made manifest. "My lord," says Sir Dennis Arryn, approaching with the measured steps of a man who brings unwelcome counsel. The scouts report Targaryen forces, gathering at the gates of the moon. Lord Royce commands them in your name, but his ravens speak of difficult choices ahead. Jon Arryn turns from the narrow window that shows him the world spread out far below, his weathered face reflecting the weight of years spent in service to the realm. At 60 years old, he has served as regent, fought in 2 wars, and raised Robert Baratheon like his own son. Now that adopted son lies dead in the Trident's waters, and the lord who guided his youth must decide whether to follow him into the grave. "Or how many men does Rhaegar bring to our doorstep?" Jon asks, though he suspects the answer will offer little comfort. 20,000, perhaps more," Dennis replies reluctantly. "Lords from the Riverlands and Crownlands, with Dornish spears and Reach cavalry. They speak King Rhaegar's name with the fervour of men who have tasted victory and hunger for more." The numbers strike Jon Arryn like physical blows, each one adding weight to the choice that hangs before him. The Vale can muster 15,000 men if every lord answers the call, but half of those are scattered across a dozen castles, and the other half question whether this rebellion serves any purpose beyond honour's demands. From the Solar's door comes the sound of light footsteps and gentle voices, and Jon's heart grows heavier as he recognizes his wife's approach. Lady Lysa Arryn enters with their son in her arms, little Robert gurgling happily as he plays with the silver falcon that decorates his mother's dress. At barely 2 years old, the boy represents everything Jon has to lose in this war that grows more hopeless with each passing day. "Husband," Lysa says, her voice carrying the strain of a woman who has watched armies gather at her gates. "The maesters bring word that more ravens arrive by the hour. What news from the realm?" Jon studies his wife's face and sees the fear she tries to hide behind determined smiles. Lysa Tully married him to forge an alliance between their houses, but she has given him more than political necessity could demand. She has given him love, and a son whose laughter brightens even the darkest councils of war. "Dark tidings," he admits, to reaching out to stroke little Robert's soft hair. "The rebellion fractures like ice in spring. Each day brings word of another house that bends the knee to King Rhaegar." "And what of Catelyn?" Lysa asks, her voice tight with worry for her sister in the distant north. "What word from Winterfell?" "Ned Stark holds fast," Jon replies, but even as he speaks the words, he knows they offer little comfort. Holding fast and winning are different things entirely, and the north grows more isolated with each passing week. A commotion in the courtyard below draws their attention to the narrow window, where they can see a party of riders approaching under banners that make Jon's blood run cold. The 3-headed dragon of House Targaryen flies beside the golden falcon of House Templeton, and the sight tells a story that needs no words to explain. "But emissaries," Jon says grimly. "It seems King Rhaegar has decided to offer terms before steel rings in these mountains." The great hall of the Eyrie fills with the lords of the Vale as word spreads that royal envoys have climbed the giant's lance to treat with their liege lord. Ancient banners hang from the walls like memories of better days, and the assembled nobility represents every corner of the mountain kingdom that has stood unconquered for 6,000 years. Lord Gerald Grafton arrives first, his seahorse banners proclaiming his loyalty to House Arryn, despite the doubts that show in his weathered eyes. Behind him come Lord Benedar Belmore, Lord Lionel Corbray, with his Valyrian steel sword at his side, and a dozen other lords whose houses have served the Arryns since the Age of Heroes. "What, my lords?" Jon Arryn addresses the assembly as the royal emissaries take their place in the hall's centre. "We face a choice that will determine the fate of our ancient realm. Hear what King Rhaegar offers, and let each man speak his counsel freely." Sir Ronel Arryn, distant cousin to the Lord himself, steps forward bearing the royal decree with hands that tremble only slightly. His voice carries clearly through the hall as he reads the terms that could end the Vale's participation in this dying rebellion. To Jon Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie and Defender of the Vale, the decree begins. His Grace, King Rhaegar of House Targaryen, offers full pardon for all acts of rebellion committed in service to the usurper's cause. All lands, titles, and privileges shall be restored to those lords who swear renewed fealty to the Iron Throne. Now, furthermore, the Vale shall retain its ancient customs and laws, with Lord Jon Arryn confirmed as Warden of the East and trusted counsellor to the Crown. The words hang in the air like morning mist, beautiful and tempting, but somehow insubstantial. Every lord present understands the weight of what is offered, not just survival, but honour preserved and ancient privileges maintained. It is more than most rebels could hope for, and far more generous than Aerys the Mad ever offered to anyone. Generous terms, observes Lord Jon Royce, his bronze armour clanking softly as he shifts his weight. But what surety do we have that these promises will outlast the Crown's immediate need for our submission? Sir Ronald produces a second scroll bearing the King's personal seal. His Grace offers hostages from his own court, he announces. Younger sons of great houses to be fostered in the Vale, ensuring the Crown's good faith. Moreover, Lord Jon would be welcomed at court with full honours, his counsel valued in all matters touching the realm's governance. But even as the generous terms are laid out, a darker message emerges from the envoy's careful words. The unspoken threat hangs over the hall like a sword suspended by a thread. Submit now and prosper, or resist further and face the dragon's wrath. And if we refuse these terms? Asks Lord Corbray, his hand resting on the pommel of Lady Forlorn. What then does his Grace promise? Sir Ronell's face grows grave as he delivers the answer that every man present has already guessed. Then the King's peace must be enforced by the King's justice. The Vale will be pacified, or its lords replaced by those more loyal to the Crown. The ancient line of House Arryn faces the same choice as all rebels, submission or extinction. The threat to little Robert needs no elaboration. Every lord present understands what happens to the children of rebels who refuse royal mercy, and the sight of the boy playing innocently in his mother's arms adds weight to words that already carry the force of inevitability. Jon Arryn calls for private counsel with his closest advisers, and the great hall empties, save for his family and the men who have served House Arryn faithfully through peace and war. In this smaller gathering, harsh truths can be spoken without the formality that public assemblies demand. The choice is stark, says Sir Dennis Arryn, his weathered face showing the strain of recent weeks. Accept these terms, and the Vale survives with honour intact. Refuse, and we face destruction for the sake of a cause that already lies dying. But what of our oaths? Asks Lord Grafton, his voice heavy with the weight of bonds sworn in better days. What of the loyalty we pledged to Robert Baratheon's cause? Robert is dead, Lysa says sharply, her maternal instincts overriding political niceties. Dead and gone, and no oath sworn to him requires us to sacrifice our living son for his ghost. Would you see little Robert share his namesake's fate for the sake of empty honour? The words create a division in the room that reflects the larger split tearing through the Vale. Some lords nod at Lysa's practical wisdom, while others recoil from what they see as abandonment of everything their houses represent. No, but all of them understand that whatever choice they make will echo through generations yet unborn. A raven arrives, even as they debate, bearing the seal of Winterfell, and words that make Jon's heart grow heavier still. Ned Stark's message is brief but clear. The North will fight to the end, regardless of what allies choose to abandon the cause. It is both an understanding and an accusation, forgiving Jon for choices not yet made, while reminding him of the cost of those choices. He knows, Jon says quietly, as he sets the letter aside. Ned understands that we cannot hold. He releases us from our obligations, while reminding us what honor demands. That evening, Jon Arryn walks the battlements of the Eyrie alone, his breath misting in the cold mountain air as he looks out over the vale that has been his family's charge for 60 centuries. Below him, scattered lights mark the homes of small folk who look to him for protection, and above him, stars wheel in their courses like distant witnesses to the choices of mortal men. When he returns to his chambers, he finds Lysa waiting with their son, asleep in her arms. The sight of them together, his wife's worried face and his child's peaceful slumber, makes the choice that has tormented him suddenly simple. "Send word to the king's envoy," he tells the Maester who awaits his command. The Vale accepts his grace's generous terms. Lord Jon Arryn will swear renewed fealty to the Iron Throne. The ceremony takes place 3 days later in the great hall of the Eyrie, what with the lords of the Vale watching as their ancient leader kneels before Rhaegar's representative. The words of submission come slowly, each one a small death for the proud lord who helped raise the man who died at the Trident. "I, Jon Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie and Defender of the Vale, do hereby renounce all acts of rebellion against the crown," he declares, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I swear renewed fealty to King Rhaegar of House Targaryen, and pledge my sword, my lands, and my life to his service." As he speaks the words that end the Vale's participation in Robert's war, Jon's thoughts turn north to Winterfell, where Ned Stark must now face the dragon's wrath alone. The young lord who was like a son to him has chosen the harder path, the one that leads to honor or death, with little middle ground between them. The rebellion that began with such hope dies a little more with each knee that bends to Rhaegar's crown. The Vale's submission leaves only the north in open defiance, and winter winds carry whispers that even the fiercest wolves cannot stand alone against the dragon's fire forever. In King's Landing, word of the Vale's surrender brings satisfaction to a king who prefers submission to slaughter. One by one, the 7 kingdoms return to the royal peace, until only the north remains outside the realm's unity. Soon, very soon, even that resistance must end. The Game of Thrones plays out its final moves, and the Dragon King's victory grows more complete with each passing day. But in the lonely halls of Winterfell, the last wolf still howls defiance into the winter wind, and some songs are worth singing, even when no one remains to hear them end. The Red Keep has transformed into something that would have seemed impossible only months before, a palace where former enemies sit at the same council table and speak of unity rather than vengeance. In the throne room where Mad King Aerys once raved about traitors and conspiracies, King Rhaegar, the first Targaryen, holds court with a wisdom that surprises even his supporters. Lord Jon Arryn takes his place at the king's right hand, his weathered face showing the strain of recent choices, but his voice steady as he reports on the Vale's integration into royal governance. Across the table, Lord Stannis Baratheon speaks with characteristic bluntness about the Stormland's resources and the supplies needed for the campaign that everyone knows must come. "Your Grace," Jon Arryn says, unrolling maps that show the current state of the realm. "The lords of the Vale have sworn their oaths and opened their granaries to the crown. We can provision 20,000 men for a winter campaign, though the mountain passes will be treacherous once the snows begin in earnest." Rhaegar studies the reports with the attention of a commander who has learned that details win wars as surely as courage does. The former rebels who now serve him bring knowledge that gold cannot purchase, intimate understanding of their region's strengths, and the loyalty of men who chose submission over destruction. "And the Riverlands?" he asks, turning to Lord Hoster Tully, who arrived from Riverrun the previous week with his daughter's blessings for the new order. "Recovering, Your Grace," Hoster replies, his lined face showing the cost of a war that raged across his lands. The harvest was poor this year, but my lords will answer your call. They understand that peace requires the North's submission as much as our own. But even as Rhaegar builds his coalition of former enemies, a shadow hangs over the Red Keep that threatens everything he has constructed. In chambers high above the throne room, Rhaegar Targaryen paces his solar like a caged animal, his madness growing stronger with each day of confinement. The Mad King no longer appears in public, kept from view by guards who speak of protecting his dignity, while everyone understands they protect the realm from his ravings. But his presence haunts the castle like a fever, and his occasional shrieks echo through the corridors at night when sleep eludes his tormented mind. He grows worse, Sir Barristan Selmy confides to his king during one of their private conferences. The Maesters speak of giving him milk of the poppy to ease his suffering, but he refuses all treatment. He claims his son has poisoned the entire court against him. Rhaegar closes his eyes and feels the weight of a crown that seems to grow heavier with each passing day. He has won the throne through strength and skill, but keeping it requires dealing with problems that swords cannot solve. His father's madness represents a threat to everything he hopes to build, a reminder of Targaryen instability that enemies could use to justify rebellion. I will speak with him, Rhaegar decides, knowing that the conversation he has avoided for weeks must finally take place. The king's chambers lie in the highest tower of Maegor's Holdfast, that where thick walls contain whatever horrors the Mad King's deteriorating mind might produce. Guards stand at attention as Rhaegar approaches, their faces carefully neutral as they admit him to rooms that have become both prison and sanctuary. Aerys stands by the narrow window, his wild silver hair hanging past his shoulders in greasy strands. His fingernails have grown long and yellow, and he wears the same robe he has worn for days, stained with food and wine from meals he barely touches. When he turns to face his son, his purple eyes burn with the fire that has consumed his reason. So, Aerys whispers, his voice carrying the edge of madness that has become his constant companion, the usurper king comes to visit his prisoner. Do you come to gloat over your victory, my son, or to finish what your rebellion began? Rhaegar enters the chamber slowly, his hands visible and empty to show he means no immediate harm. The room reeks of unwashed flesh and chamber pots that servants are no longer allowed to empty without the king's presence. It is a squalor that would shame the poorest septons, made worse by the knowledge that it houses a man who once commanded the loyalty of millions. I come to speak with my father, Rhaegar says gently, to understand why you see enemies where only family stands before you. Family! Aerys shrieks, spittle flying from his cracked lips. You speak of family while you hold me prisoner in my own castle. You wear my crown and sit my throne while claiming love for the man you have displaced. The accusation hangs in the air between them, carrying just enough truth to wound. Rhaegar has taken everything that once belonged to his father, throne, crown, authority, and respect. That he did so to save the realm from madness does not change the essential facts of patricide without murder. You were destroying everything our house built, Rhaegar replies, his voice growing firm as he speaks truths that have needed saying for months. Your paranoia turned loyal lords into enemies. Your cruelty gave Robert's rebellion justification it never should have possessed. I took the throne not from ambition, but from necessity. Aerys stares at his son with eyes that seem to look through him rather than at him, seeing conspiracies and betrayals that exist only in his fevered imagination. Necessary, he repeats, tasting the word like poison. Everything is necessary when spoken by usurpers. Tell me, my son, when you sit the Iron Throne and feel its edges cutting into your flesh, do you remember that it was built from the swords of conquered kings? The words carry a weight that makes Rhaegar's chest tighten with recognition. The Iron Throne has indeed cut him during long sessions of court, tiny wounds that remind him daily of the price of power. But he refuses to let his father's madness twist that symbolism into something darker than it already is. I remember that Aegon the Conqueror built something greater than any of the kingdoms he defeated, Rhaegar counters. I remember that dragons brought peace to a realm torn by endless wars between petty kings. But even as he speaks, Rhaegar can see that reason will not reach his father. The madness has progressed too far, consumed too much of the man who once ruled wisely. Aerys II Targaryen has become a husk of himself, a shell filled with paranoia and rage that grows stronger as his body grows weaker. The conversation continues for another hour, circling through the same accusations and justifications until both men are exhausted by the futility of it. When Rhaegar finally leaves his father's chambers, he knows with cold certainty that this will be the last time they speak as father and son. 3 days later, servants find King Aerys dead in his bed, his body finally surrendering to the madness that has consumed his mind. The maesters speak of natural causes, a heart that simply stopped beating, worn out by years of stress and paranoia. There are no signs of violence, no evidence of poison or murder. The Mad King dies as he lived in his final years, alone and afraid of shadows only he could see. The funeral takes place in the great sept of Baelor, with the High Septon speaking words of forgiveness and redemption that feel hollow in the mouths of men who remember Aerys's cruelties. But Rhaegar insists on full royal honors for his father, understanding that mercy shown to the dead often matters more than mercy shown to the living. As the bells toll across King's Landing, announcing the death of one king and the undisputed rule of another, Rhaegar feels a mixture of grief and relief that shames him, even as he acknowledges its necessity. His father's death removes the last shadow over his reign, but it also completes a transformation he never wanted, from prince to regicide, even if no violence passed between them. "The realm mourns with you, your grace," Lord Jon Arryn says after the ceremony, his voice carrying the understanding of a man who has buried children and watched dynasties rise and fall. But it also celebrates the stability your sole rule brings. The Seven Kingdoms need a king who is whole, not divided between duty and family loyalty. The integration of former rebel forces into the royal army proceeds with surprising smoothness once Aerys's death removes the last obstacle to full reconciliation. Lords who once fought against the Targaryen restoration now compete to prove their loyalty to the new order, bringing their bannermen and resources to swell the ranks of the force that will soon march north. In the throne room, maps of the north cover every surface as Rhaegar and his commanders plan the campaign that will finally end Robert's rebellion. The distances are vast and the terrain difficult, but the king's forces enjoy overwhelming advantages in numbers, supplies, and morale. 3 columns, Lord Stannis suggests, his practical mind cutting through romantic notions of single decisive battles. One through the neck to pin down any forces at Moat Cailin, another along the eastern coast to threaten White Harbour, and the main force directly up the King's Road toward Winterfell. Stark cannot defend against all 3 approaches simultaneously. The strategy has merit, but Rhaegar finds his thoughts drifting southward to Dorne and the woman whose love sparked this entire war. Lyanna waits for him in the Tower of Joy, guarded by Arthur Dayne and the other knights he left to ensure her safety. Each day that passes takes him further from the promise he made to return to her side. "By your grace," Jon Arryn's voice breaks through Rhaegar's reverie, bringing him back to the immediate demands of kingship. "You seem distant. Are you well?" "Well enough," Rhaegar replies, forcing his attention back to the maps and the calculations that will determine how quickly this war can end. "I was thinking of promises made and promises kept. The North must be dealt with before winter deepens further." But that night, alone in the royal chambers that once belonged to his father, Rhaegar writes a letter to Arthur Dayne that carries more weight than any military dispatch. The words come slowly, each one chosen with the care of a man who knows that love and duty often demand different choices. My faithful friend, the letter begins, the realm nears peace at last, but the final campaign approaches. Keep her safe and well. When the North submits, I will come for you both, and the promises I made will finally be fulfilled. The dragon remembers what matters most, even when crown and kingdom demand its immediate attention. The raven takes wing toward dawn like a black promise, flying through the night, carrying hope to a tower where love waits for war to end. Soon, very soon, Rhaegar will be free to claim the happiness that has eluded him throughout this bloody year of rebellion and consolidation. But first, the wolves of Winterfell must be dealt with, and the Seven Kingdoms must learn once and for all that the dragon's peace requires submission from all corners of the realm. The final campaign beckons, and with it, the last chance for the North to choose submission over destruction. Winter is coming, but the Dragon King rides to meet it with fire and determination that will not be denied. The Game of Thrones nears its conclusion, and only one player remains standing in Rhaegar's path to undisputed victory. The greatest army the Seven Kingdoms have seen since Aegon, the conqueror landed at Blackwater Rush, moves north like a tide of steel and silk, their banners streaming in the cold wind that carries the promise of winter. 60,000 men march under the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen, drawn from every corner of the realm that has bent the knee to King Rhaegar's authority. At the column's head rides the Dragon King himself, his silver hair bright beneath a crown of Valyrian steel and rubies. Behind him follow lords who once called him enemy. Jon Arryn with the Knights of the Vale, Stannis Baratheon leading the men of the Stormlands, Hoster Tully commanding forces that know every river crossing in the north. The sight of former rebels marching beneath Targaryen banners speaks louder than any royal decree about the completeness of Rhaegar's victory. "Your Grace," says Sir Barristan Selmy as he rides beside his king, the white cloak of the King's Guard snapping in the wind. "Our scouts report that Lord Stark has withdrawn all his forces to Winterfell. He makes no attempt to contest our advance or defend the river crossings." Rhaegar nods grimly, understanding the strategy of desperation that drives his last enemy. Ned Stark knows he cannot win this war through conventional tactics, so he stakes everything on forcing the Dragon King to assault the strongest fortress in the north. It is the choice of a man who would rather die with honor than live in submission. "How many men does he command?" Rhaegar asks, though intelligence reports have already given him the answer. "Perhaps 8,000, Lord Stannis replies, consulting the dispatches his outriders have sent. "The Umbers and Mormonts hold the flanks, while Stark himself commands the center from behind Winterfell's walls. They are outnumbered 7-1, but they fight for their homes and their honor." The disparity in numbers tells its own story, but Rhaegar has learned not to discount courage born of desperation. The North has produced some of the finest warriors in Westeros, and cornered wolves bite deepest when they know death awaits regardless of their choice. At Winterfell, as Ned Stark stands on the battlements and watches the southern host spread across the fields below like a dark sea dotted with the colors of every great house in the realm. The sight should fill him with despair, but instead, he feels a strange peace settling over his shoulders. The choice has been made, the die cast, and now only death or victory remain. "They cover the horizon," says Lord Karstark as he joins Ned on the walls, his weathered face showing no fear despite the impossible odds. "I've never seen so many men gathered in one place. Every lord south of the Neck must have answered Rhaegar's call." "Good," Ned replies, surprising his bannerman with the calm acceptance in his voice. "Let them all come and see how wolves die when they choose the manner of their going." In the great hall of Winterfell, the last council of the Northern Rebellion convenes with the weight of finality hanging over every word. The lords who remain have followed Ned through months of guerrilla warfare and political isolation, and they wear their loyalty like badges of honor, despite the cost it has demanded. We could still treat for terms, suggests Lord Serwyn, his voice heavy with the knowledge that his own house stands on the brink of extinction. King Rhaegar has shown mercy to other rebels. Perhaps, no. The Greatjohn's voice cuts through the suggestion, like a blade through silk. We came here to fight, not to grovel for scraps from a dragon's table. Let them come and take Winterfell if they can. They'll pay in blood for every stone. The debate continues for an hour, with practical voices arguing for survival against those who demand honor, regardless of cost. But everyone present knows that the decision ultimately rests with the man who sits in silence at the high table, his grey eyes fixed on thoughts only he can see. Catelyn enters the hall as the council disperses, her pregnancy now showing clearly beneath the heavy furs that ward off winter's growing bite. She moves with the careful grace of a woman who carries precious cargo, and her blue eyes show the strain of a wife who faces losing everything she has learned to love. "Husband," she says, as the last lords file out, leaving them alone in the hall, where Stark kings have held court for 8,000 years. Must it end this way? Must our child grow up fatherless for the sake of ghosts and memories? Ned rises and takes her hands, at feeling the warmth of life in her touch, even as death gathers outside their walls. "Would you have me kneel to the son of the man who murdered my father and brother? Would you have our son learn that honor means nothing when tested by fire?" "I would have you alive," Catelyn replies, tears she has held back for weeks finally spilling down her cheeks. "I would have our child know his father's voice, not just the songs they sing about his death. The North needs living lords, not dead heroes." The words cut deeper than any blade could, striking at the heart of Ned's deepest fears. He knows that choosing death serves no one save his own conscience, knows that pragmatic submission might serve his people better than honorable destruction. But some choices once made cannot be unmade without destroying the man who makes them. "And the dragon comes," he says finally, stroking her auburn hair with gentle fingers. "If I submit now, after all who have died for this cause, what does that say about their sacrifice? What does that say about the value of northern independence?" Before Catelyn can reply, horns sound across the countryside as Rhaegar's army assumes battle positions around Winterfell's ancient walls. The siege that will decide the fate of the Seven Kingdoms has begun, and both sides understand that only one will see another dawn. The Battle of Winterfell begins before sunrise, as Targaryen siege engines loose their first volleys against walls that have stood unconquered since the Age of Heroes. Great stones crash against ancient stones, sending chips of granite flying like deadly snow, as but the fortress that defied wildling kings and Kneeler armies holds firm against the southern assault. From the battlements, northern archers send death flying into the ranks of men who approach with scaling ladders and grappling hooks. Every shot counts when arrows are precious and enemies numberless, and each fallen Southron buys another moment of defiance for the last free stronghold in the north. "Give them steel!" roars the Great John as the first ladders reach the walls, his massive axe cleaving through armor and bone with equal ease. Show these southern flowers how wolves bite. The fighting on the walls becomes a desperate melee as Targaryen knights pour over the battlements in numbers that northern defenders cannot match. Steel rings against steel in a symphony of violence that echoes across the countryside, while men die for causes greater than their individual lives. Sir Jorah Mormont holds the eastern tower against 3 separate assaults, his sword dark with blood, and his bear crest helm dented from a dozen blows. "For the north!" he shouts as he cuts down a knight whose surcoat bears the golden roses of House Tyrell. "For Winterfell!" But courage and skill cannot overcome impossible odds forever. Section by section, The walls fall to attackers who seem to multiply like wolves in winter, until only the keep itself remains in northern hands. Ned Stark stands in the courtyard as his bannermen form the last circle around their lord, their weapons ready and their faces grim with the knowledge that death comes for them all. Rhaegar Targaryen rides through the breach in Winterfell's walls like a king out of legend, his armor shining silver in the morning light, and his sword singing with each stroke that cuts down northern resistance. Behind him come the greatest knights of 7 kingdoms, their combined might focused on the ancient seat of Stark power. "Ned Stark!" the king calls out, his voice carrying across the courtyard where the last defenders make their stand. "You have fought with honor and courage that would make your ancestors proud. But this ends now, one way or another." The Lord of Winterfell steps forward from his circle of guards, ice naked in his hands, and his grey eyes steady as winter steel. "Your Grace," he replies with formal courtesy that surprises both armies, "you have won your war and claimed your throne. Why do you need the submission of one stubborn wolf?" "Because the realm must be whole," Rhaegar answers, dismounting from his destrier to face Ned on equal ground. "Because peace requires that all the kingdoms acknowledge one crown, and because you, of all men, deserve the chance to surrender with dignity intact." Ned considers the offer for a long moment, weighing duty against pragmatism, honor against survival. Around him, his bannermen wait for the word that will send them into glorious death or ignoble submission. The choice, like so many in this war, offers no path that does not lead to loss. "I will not kneel," Ned says finally, raising ice in salute to a worthy enemy. "But I will face you sword to sword, king to lord, and let the gods decide which cause they favor." The duel that follows becomes the stuff of legend, though few witnesses survive to tell the tale. And Ned Stark fights with the skill that made him Robert Baratheon's truest friend and most capable commander, his great Valyrian steel blade weaving patterns of death that force even a king to respect its reach. But Rhaegar Targaryen wields more than royal authority. He carries the blessing of victory and the strength of a man who fights not just for conquest, but for the woman he loves. His sword finds gaps in Ned's guard that speak to countless hours of practice, and the desperate need to end this war quickly. The climax comes when Ned stumbles on the blood-slick stones of his own courtyard, and Rhaegar's blade slides past his guard to rest at his throat. For a moment that stretches like eternity, the two men stare into each other's eyes and see the reflection of choices that have brought them to this place. "Yield," Rhaegar commands, but his voice carries no triumph, only the weariness of a king who has won too many battles. "You have fought well and lost honorably. Let that be enough." Ned looks around at his surviving men, sees the great Jon on his knees with 3 swords at his neck, sees Lord Karstark bleeding from a dozen wounds, but still alive. His choice no longer affects only his own honor. It determines whether these loyal men live or die for his pride. Ice falls from nerveless fingers to ring against the courtyard stones like a funeral bell. "I yield," Ned says, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. The North yields to King Rhaegar Targaryen. The last organized resistance to Targaryen rule dies with those words, spoken in a courtyard where Stark kings once held court. As Rhaegar sheathes his sword and orders quarter for the surviving defenders, winter winds carry the news across a realm that finally, truly, belongs to one king. The dragon has conquered the wolf at last, but even in victory, Rhaegar finds no joy. The crown grows heavier with each kingdom that submits, weighted with the blood of good men who died for causes they believed in. Peace has come to the 7 kingdoms, but the price of that peace will echo through generations yet unborn. Winterfell has fallen, the North has submitted, and the Game of Thrones finally nears its end. But in a tower in Dawn, a woman still waits for promises to be fulfilled, and love remains the only prize that matters more than crowns. The great hall of Winterfell fills with an uneasy quiet as King Rhaegar the First Targaryen takes his place on the ancient seat of Stark kings, his silver hair catching the light from torches that have burned through the night. The dragon banners hang beside the grey direwolf of House Stark, their colours speaking to a new order that few in the north ever imagined they would witness. Ned Stark stands before his conqueror without chains or bonds, his grey eyes steady despite the defeat that weighs on his shoulders like a cloak of lead. Behind him, the surviving northern lords wait in silence, their faces showing the mixture of pride and resignation that comes to men who have fought honourably and lost completely. "Lord Stark," Rhaegar says, his voice carrying the authority of absolute victory, but none of the cruelty that might be expected from a conquering king. "You and your bannermen fought with courage that deserves recognition, even in defeat. The realm has witnessed northern valour, and that valour has earned you the right to surrender with dignity intact." The formal words create a space where honour can survive even submission, but Ned understands that mercy offered must be mercy accepted completely. His response will determine not only his own fate, but the future of every man who followed him into this hopeless war. "Your Grace," Ned replies, his voice carrying clearly through the hall where his ancestors held court for 8,000 years. "The North acknowledges your victory and accepts your sovereignty. We fought for what we believed right, but we will not ask our people to pay further for our convictions." "Then kneel," Rhaegar commands, the words carrying no malice but all the weight of royal authority. "Kneel, and let this rebellion end as it began, with honour on both sides." Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, slowly lowers himself to one knee before the Iron Throne's representative. The sight of the wolf submitting to the dragon creates a moment of silence so profound that men can hear their own heartbeats echoing in the ancient stones. "Rise, Lord Stark," Rhaegar says, after the moment stretches long enough to satisfy both ceremony and symbolism. "You remain Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, titles confirmed by royal decree. Your lands, your people, your family, all remain under your protection, as they have for generations." But even as Rhaegar speaks of continuity, both men understand that everything has changed. The North will remain autonomous in many ways, but it will never again stand apart from the Seven Kingdoms. The price of rebellion has been paid, and the lesson will not be forgotten for generations. Lord Jon Arryn steps forward from his place among the king's advisers, his weathered face showing the strain of a man who has watched former allies submit to new realities. His Grace's terms are generous, he observes, speaking as much to the northern lords as to their defeated leader. Full pardons, confirmed titles, and the preservation of northern customs under royal oversight. The generosity masks harder truths that everyone present understands without need for elaboration. Hostages will be required, younger sons and daughters sent south to ensure their father's continued loyalty. Taxes will flow to King's Landing, that once remained in northern treasuries. And royal garrisons will be stationed at key castles to guarantee that submission, once given, remains permanent. "What hostages does His Grace require?" Ned asks, his voice steady, despite the personal cost such arrangements always demand from fathers and lords. Rhaegar considers the question carefully, understanding that his answer must balance security with mercy, authority with the need to avoid creating new grievances. "One child from each great house," he decides. To be fostered at court with full honours, educated as befits their stations, and treated as royal wards rather than prisoners. The terms are as generous as Ned could have hoped, but they still mean separation from children not yet born, and bonds that will tie northern houses to the crown through their most precious treasures. Catelyn, but watching from the side of the hall, places a protective hand over her swelling belly and understands that their unborn child may someday walk the halls of the Red Keep as surety for northern loyalty. The North accepts these terms, Ned says formally, speaking not just for himself, but for every lord who has followed him through rebellion and defeat. We will honor our oaths and serve the realm faithfully. One by one, the northern lords approach the makeshift throne to offer their own submissions. The Great John's massive frame seems diminished as he bends his knee, but his voice remains strong as he pledges House Umber's renewed loyalty. Lord Karstark follows, his weathered face showing the scars of recent battles, but his words carrying the weight of ancient honor. "Your Grace," Lord Karstark says, as he completes his oath. "The Karstarks have served the Starks for 1,000 years. We will serve your crown with the same faithfulness, if you will have us." "I will have all who offer true service," Rhaegar replies, understanding that magnanimity in victory often proves more effective than harshness. The realm has room for every house that chooses loyalty over rebellion. As the ceremony continues, Catelyn approaches her husband with steps that speak to the relief of a woman who has seen her family preserved against impossible odds. Her blue eyes show tears that might be grief for the defeated cause or joy for the lives that have been spared. "It is finished, then," she says quietly, her voice meant for Ned alone, despite the crowd that surrounds them. "The war is truly over." "This war," Ned agrees, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. "Oh, but there will be others. There are always others in the Game of Thrones." But even as he speaks of future conflicts, Ned feels a weight lifting from his shoulders that has pressed down on him since his father's murder in King's Landing. The rebellion is over, the North has submitted, and his people can begin the long process of healing from wounds that have bled for too long. Rhaegar watches the interactions between husband and wife, lord and lady, and feels his thoughts turning southward to another woman who waits in another tower. Lyanna has been patient beyond any reasonable expectation, but patience has limits even for love as strong as theirs. The realm is finally at peace, and that peace demands that he honor the promises that sparked this entire war. "Lord Stark," he says, as the formal submissions conclude and the hall begins to empty. "Walk with me. There are matters we should discuss privately." They retire to the solar that has served Stark lords for generations, its narrow windows looking out over the godswood where the heart tree's red leaves rustle in winter wind. Here, away from the formality of throne rooms and the weight of ceremony, king and subject can speak as men who have fought each other with honor. "You fought well," Rhaegar says without preamble. "Robert would have been proud of your courage, even if he might have questioned your wisdom." The mention of his dead friend brings pain to Ned's eyes, but also something that might be gratitude for acknowledgement of a loss that still cuts deep. "Robert was my brother in all but blood," he admits. "His death changed everything I thought I knew about honor and duty. And yet you continued his war long after it became hopeless," Rhaegar observes. "Why? What drove you to choose almost certain death over submission that would have saved so many lives?" Ned considers the question for a long moment, weighing words that will help his conqueror understand motivations that may seem foolish to a man who has won everything. "Because some things matter more than survival," he says finally. "Because the North needed to know that its lords would not abandon their oaths, even when those oaths led to destruction." "The North will remember," Rhaegar agrees, "and that memory will serve the realm well, when it understands that submission, freely given, carries more honor than conquest achieved through slaughter." Plans for northern governance take shape over the following days, as Rhaegar works with Ned and Jon Arryn to establish structures that will preserve northern autonomy while ensuring royal authority. Garrisons will be small and discreet, taxes reasonable but consistent, and the ancient rights of the North will remain largely intact under the new dispensation. You could rule here yourself, Jon Arryn suggests during one of their planning sessions. Take direct control rather than working through intermediaries who might develop their own ambitions. But Rhaegar shakes his head, understanding that heavy-handed rule breeds resentment that eventually explodes into new rebellions. The North has always been different from the southern kingdoms, he says. It requires different governance, and Lord Stark has proven himself a man of honor even in defeat. Better to rule through established loyalty than to impose foreign authority. As winter deepens around Winterfell, word arrives from across the Seven Kingdoms that the realm celebrates the end of Robert's rebellion with festivals and feasts that mark the beginning of a new age. Peace has returned to lands that have bled for too long, and merchants speak of trade routes reopening and harvests that will feed the realm through the dark months ahead. But for all the celebration of peace achieved, Rhaegar feels the pull of promises unfulfilled, calling him southward toward dawn. Lyanna waits for him in the Tower of Joy, her patience a treasure more valuable than any crown, and every day that passes takes him further from the love that made this victory meaningful. I leave for King's Landing tomorrow, he announces to his assembled commanders, the decision carrying weight that everyone present understands. Lord Arryn will remain to oversee the transition, but the North is pacified, and the realm requires its king's presence in the capital. The practical truth masks a deeper need that only Rhaegar fully comprehends. The crown is secure, the kingdoms are united, and the time has come to claim the personal happiness that has waited through months of war and conquest. Lyanna has given him everything: love, purpose, and the strength to reshape the Seven Kingdoms according to their shared vision. Soon, very soon, he will ride south to collect the bride who has waited in her tower prison, and together they will rule an empire built on love as much as conquest. The Game of Thrones is ending, but the Game of Hearts has only just begun its most important chapter. Winter winds carry the dragon banners south as King Rhaegar I Targaryen leaves the north behind him, secure in the knowledge that wolves and dragons can coexist when honor binds them together. The realm is whole at last, and love waits to complete the victory that sword and crown have achieved through blood and determination. The last submission has been given, the last oath sworn, and the Seven Kingdoms stand ready to embrace the peace that has cost so much to achieve. But in a tower in dawn, a woman still waits for promises to be fulfilled, and the greatest prize of all remains unclaimed. The Tower of Joy rises from the red mountains of dawn like a pale finger pointing toward the sky, its ancient stones bleached white by centuries of desert sun and wind. King Rhaegar I Targaryen rides toward the tower with only a small guard, his silver hair streaming behind him, as his destrier carries him toward the woman who has waited through months of war and conquest. Arthur Dayne stands watch on the tower's battlements, his white cloak bright against the blue sky, as he recognizes the approach of his king and friend. The Sword of the Morning has kept his vigil faithfully, protecting the most precious treasure in the Seven Kingdoms, while Rhaegar claimed his throne through fire and blood. Now, at last, duty and love can be reunited. "Your Grace," Arthur calls down from the walls, his voice carrying both relief and joy. "You return victorious, as we knew you would. She waits for you above, and she is not alone." The cryptic words send Rhaegar's heart racing as he dismounts and takes the tower steps 3 at a time, his mind conjuring possibilities he has not dared to hope for during the long months of war. Behind him, Sir Oswell Whent and Sir Gerald Hightower maintain their posts, but their knowing smiles speak to secrets that only they have shared. In the tower's highest chamber, Lyanna Stark sits by the narrow window, her dark hair falling like a curtain around shoulders that have grown thin during her long captivity. But in her arms, Wrapped in soft cloth of silver and blue, lies a child whose very existence changes the future of the Seven Kingdoms. "Rhaegar," she says as he enters, her grey eyes showing the mixture of love and sorrow that has marked their entire relationship. "You came back to us." He crosses the chamber in 3 quick strides and falls to his knees beside her chair, his violet eyes fixed on the tiny face that peers up at him with eyes like chips of obsidian. The child is perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and the unmistakable features that mark him as both Stark and Targaryen, ice and fire joined in one small body. "Our son," Rhaegar whispers, his voice thick with emotions he has held back through months of war and kingship. "He lives. You both live." "Jon," Lyanna says, placing the baby gently in his father's arms. "I named him Jon for Jon Arryn, who helped raise the man I first loved, and the boy who would have been my husband. It seemed what appropriate." The name carries weight that both parents understand, a bridge between the old world and the new, honoring the past while embracing a future that their love has made possible. Rhaegar holds his son with the careful reverence of a man who has conquered kingdoms but has never held anything more precious than this small life. "He has your eyes," Lyanna observes, studying the man she has not seen since he left for the war that would reshape their world. "And your hair is already showing silver at the temples. Kingship ages a man quickly." "The crown is heavy," Rhaegar admits, his attention divided between his son's tiny face and the woman whose love has sustained him through the darkest moments of conquest. "But it grows lighter when held for the right reasons. Everything I have done, every choice I have made, or has been to clear a path back to this tower and the family it contains." Lyanna's expression grows troubled as she considers the cost of the victory that has brought them together. "How many died for our love, Rhaegar? How many mothers weep for sons who will not return from your war?" The question strikes him like a physical blow, forcing him to confront truths that crowns and conquest cannot erase. Robert Baratheon lies dead in the Trident's waters, along with thousands of other men who died for causes they believed in. The price of love, when paid in blood, becomes a debt that can never be fully repaid. "Too many," he answers honestly, understanding that lies would serve neither of them. "But the realm is at peace now, and that peace will preserve more lives than the war cost. Our son will inherit a kingdom united, not one torn apart by endless rebellion and strife." They speak through the afternoon, sharing the experiences that war has forced them apart to endure separately. Lyanna tells him of the lonely months in the tower, the fear when labor began with no certainty that he would return, and the fierce joy she felt when Jon drew his first breath. Rhaegar speaks of battles won and enemies reconciled, of the crushing weight of kingship and the constant pull southward toward dawn and the woman he loved. "Will you marry me?" he asks, as evening light streams through the tower windows, the question carrying more weight than any royal decree. "Not for duty or politics, but for love? Will you be my queen in truth, not just in my heart?" Lyanna considers the proposal with the gravity it deserves, understanding that accepting means embracing a role she never wanted and responsibilities that will shadow the rest of her life. But when she looks at their son sleeping peacefully in her arms, the choice becomes clear. "Yes," she says simply, "but not here, in this tower that has been both sanctuary and prison, in the Sept of Baelor, before the eyes of the realm, so that no man can question our son's legitimacy or our union's validity." The wedding takes place a month later, after ravens have carried word across the Seven Kingdoms that their king has found both love and an heir. The ceremony in the Great Sept draws lords from every corner of the realm, former rebels standing beside lifelong loyalists as they witness the union that began this entire war. Ned Stark travels south from Winterfell to give his sister away, his grey eyes showing the complex emotions of a man who has gained a nephew while losing the war he fought in her name. The sight of Lyanna alive and well, radiant in Targaryen silver and white, makes every sacrifice feel worthwhile, even as it reminds him of battles lost and friends who died. She is happy, Catelyn observes as they watch the couple exchange vows, her own pregnancy now showing clearly as she prepares to birth the child who will grow up in this new world. Whatever pain our war caused, she has found joy at its end. The coronation of Queen Lyanna follows immediately after the wedding, as the High Septon places a crown of silver and sapphires on her dark head. The assembled lords cheer for their new queen, but more importantly, they accept the legitimacy of the son she has given their king. Prince Jon Targaryen, first of his name and heir to the Iron Throne, sleeps peacefully through his parents' triumph, unaware that his very existence represents the victory of love over duty, passion over political necessity. The realm has a future that stretches beyond the current generation, and that future bears the combined legacy of ice and fire, Stark honor, and Targaryen vision. In the months that follow, King Rhaegar establishes a new form of governance that seeks to prevent the rebellions that have torn the realm apart for too long. The Seven Kingdoms retain greater autonomy than they have known since Aegon's conquest, with ancient customs preserved, and local lords empowered to govern according to their region's needs. A king who rules through love earns more loyalty than one who rules through fear, Rhaegar explains to his small council, and where former rebels like Jon Arryn sit beside lifelong loyalists like Barristan Selmy. Let the lords govern their own lands according to their own traditions, and they will have less reason to dream of independence. The reforms prove popular across the realm, as lords who expected harsh punishment instead find their authority enhanced and their people prosperous. Trade flourishes under the royal peace. Harvests feed populations that have grown tired of war, and songs begin to celebrate the Dragon King who chose mercy over vengeance. But even in triumph, Rhaegar understands that ruling a realm conquered through war presents challenges that inheritance cannot solve. Some lords submit from pragmatism rather than loyalty, and resentment simmers beneath the surface like banked coals waiting for wind to fan them back into flame. For there will be other rebellions, Jon Arryn warns during one of their council sessions, his weathered face showing the wisdom of a man who has served kings for decades. Perhaps not in our generation, but eventually someone will test the crown's strength. That is the nature of power. It must be defended as well as claimed. Then we will defend it, Rhaegar replies, his hand resting on the pommel of the sword that killed Robert Baratheon and ended the greatest rebellion in living memory. But we will also ensure that our son inherits a realm worth defending, one where love and honor count for more than fear and force. Prince Jon grows from infant to toddler in the Red Keep's royal nursery, surrounded by the best tutors and protectors that royal gold can provide. His dark hair begins to show silver streaks that mark his Targaryen blood, while his grey eyes reflect the Stark heritage that connects him to the north and its ancient traditions. Queen Lyanna adapts to royal life with grace that surprises even those who doubted her ability to transition from northern lady to southern queen. She champions causes that matter to common folk, orphanages for war's victims, schools for merchants' children, and hospitals where maesters can tend the poor as well as the wealthy. She has a gift for making people feel heard, Sir Barristan observes as he watches the Queen hold court in the throne room, listening to petitions from small folk who rarely gain royal attention. The realm loves her, not just for her beauty, but for her compassion. Years pass in peace and prosperity that the Seven Kingdoms haven't known for generations. The harvests are good, the borders are secure, and the royal progress that takes the king and queen across their realm shows them a people content with Targaryen rule. Songs celebrate the love that reshaped the world, and bards compete to craft verses that capture the romance of ice and fire united. But in quiet moments, when the court sleeps and the Red Keep lies silent around them, Rhaegar and Lyanna sometimes speak of the road not taken, the lives that might have been lived if love had yielded to duty, if honor had triumphed over passion. They remember the dead who paid for their happiness and the choices that can never be unmade. "Do you regret it?" Lyanna asks one night as they watch their son sleep in his royal cradle, his peaceful face showing none of the burdens that kingship will someday place on his shoulders. The war, the deaths, or the crown that sits so heavily on your head? Rhaegar considers the question, as he has so many times before, weighing love against duty, personal happiness against public cost. When he answers, his voice carries the conviction of a man who has found peace with choices that will echo through history. "I regret the deaths," he says finally. "I regret every man who fell for our cause, every widow who mourns a husband, every child who grows up fatherless. But I do not regret the love that caused it all, or the future we have built from its ashes." The Seven Kingdoms sleep peacefully under the dragon's protection, their unity preserved by the wisdom of a king who learned that true strength lies not in conquest, but in the ability to inspire loyalty through justice and mercy. The Game of Thrones has ended, at least for this generation, and the realm looks forward to a future where love and honor might triumph over ambition and greed. In the royal nursery, Prince Jon Targaryen dreams the innocent dreams of childhood, unaware that he carries the hopes of an entire realm in his small hands. He is ice and fire made manifest, the living symbol of a love that changed the world and a future that stretches bright and promising toward tomorrow. The Tower of Joy has become a kingdom united, and the Dragon King's reign begins its first chapter in the annals of history that will remember this as the age when love conquered all.